Hi, Kerry.
Hey, John Harper. And it is always good to be here Wednesdays lunchtime on 90.3 FM WEJF, the home of Helping Seniors Radio. And we love to gather around the radio, whether you are listening to us on your computer at WEJF.net or you catch us later as a podcast. I think you're going to get a lot out of today's radio show. I was literally wishing Bill Johnson, board-certified elder law attorney, William A. Johnson. I was literally wishing you Happy New Year because we were talking about, we had pre-recorded the show for January 1st. I was up in Tallahassee. You were here in the studio the 1st of February. This was the first time I got to see you this year, and it's been such a busy year already, Bill. Welcome.
Well, Happy New Year.
You know, I was saying to Bill, I said I love to brag on him because I was, we lost our president and founder, Joe Steckler, at the end of January. There's been some really nice tributes that have been coming out about all of that. Our friends, Giles Malone and the team at Space Coast Daily, not only did they publish the whole article honoring Joe and all his work that has meant so much to so many here in Brevard County. Not only did they do that on their digital platform, spacecoastdaily.com, but they also made sure they put him into, they publish a magazine and a newspaper and put those articles so everybody can really be focused in on all the good work that Joe did along the way. And then I was telling Bill, I got news actually this week that our friends at Hometown News, which published a lot of Joe's articles along the way, they are also going to be publishing in the newspaper everything. It's actually already out online, but they're going to, anyway, your printed versions are going to include information about Joe. And a lot of people have been asking, like, what's the plan how are we going to honor Joe? So I want to give you a date and get you to put that on your calendar, and we'll give you more information as we get closer to that. It's going to be June 7th. That's a Saturday, June 7th, 10:30 a.m. If you knew Joe and his lovely wife, Terry, they were lifelong members, it seems like, for Holy Name of Jesus there in the Atlantic. And that's where they're going to do a Saturday morning Mass, 10:30 on Friday, June the 7th. And I was talking to Bill. Bill, you did a very nice article that is actually now out in the March edition of Senior Scene magazine. You know, we publish like Nancy calls it a magazine within a magazine. She calls it the Helping Seniors News magazine in the center. It's got yellow borders around so you know it. But Bill, you did a really nice article, and I love talking both with you and with John because just like Nancy, you guys all knew Joe much longer because you were helping him back in Brevard Alzheimer's days. I just met him when he was getting this going, which is now 15 years ago by itself, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say, he volunteered me and John for everything.
You know, it's funny. We have that conversation. Dr. Sheldon, who is always part of everything we do too. He said exactly the same thing. He said Joe had just a way of he would explain what needed to get done, and then you just did it. You know. So it's an amazing legacy, and Joe did leave such a legacy after serving our country. As a captain in the U.S. Navy, he retired fully from that. In fact, I was sharing that his family has explained that he's going to be laid to rest there at Arlington, which I think is only fitting for a Navy hero like Joe. But then he devoted literally, I guess I would almost say the second half of his life to everything senior. You know, he spent the time establishing Brevard Alzheimer's, making sure that was a resource that would serve families for years to come. They call them Joe's Clubs this day. And then he got us rolling 15 years ago. And that's why it was, I guess it was not this year, but it was last year, we dedicated the Senior Resource Center, that beautiful spot that Dr. Craig DeLegdish and the wonderful team at Omni Healthcare, they bought into the vision as well and said, no, we want to help you guys get this established. So we named that Joe's Senior Resource Center of Brevard. And so Joe has left a mark for so many folks. People have asked us, said, well, you know, if the family had asked if you, what do we do to remember Joe? And Joe had told me this actually before he passed. He had been on hospice up there in Maryland, which is where he and his family really kind of was kind of home roots. And so they had him up there. And the last time I spoke to Joe, he said, Kerry, you've got to, it takes a lot of money to keep a nonprofit going. You've got to stay focused on that and make sure that we keep all this going. And so his family, Steve Steckler, his son and family up there in Maryland, they said that was Joe's wishes. If somebody wants to honor him, donate, help keep the work of helping seniors going. And so how can you do that? There's a lot of different ways. I'm going to give you a phone number that you should already have this number. It's 321-473-7770. I'm going to say it again in a second so you can grab a pencil and jot it down. That is the Helping Seniors info line, which for 15 years has been answering the call for seniors and their families here in Brevard County. We get calls about everything and try to make sure that we're advancing the cause in some way, shape, or form and helping people get to, we call it senior navigation, get to a solution that's going to make a difference for their particular situation. But that phone number is also a great number because if you call up, you'll speak to Karen Warnland or one of our great team of about a dozen volunteers now who help Karen and manage the phones and just say, hey, I want to help remember Joe, and they'll be happy to help you get organized if you want to do a donation. So that's 321-473-7770. And I would also be remiss to tell you, if I didn't tell you, that there's a donate button also on the Helping Seniors website itself, which is helpingseniorsbrevard.org. And that's another great way you can safely and securely do that. And you can put in honor of Joe. In fact, we were talking about, we're going to create a Friends of Joe's Club where people who will donate in, we're actually going to acknowledge them because Joe had so many friends. I don't think any senior could have had a better friend than Joe Steckler in this community. At least that's what I think, Bill.
I would agree.
Yeah. So, we trade emails before we get on the radio, and I'm always asking Bill for his guidance and expertise. I said, what do you think we should talk about? And so literally your email, Bill, came back and said, oh, it's legislative session, so let's talk about a big, long list of bills. And I thought, what a great title for this. And then you came back with round two of that punch, and you said, but let's talk about courts as well, because I guess it all kind of tags together. And we said, let's talk of first part of the show about court cases and things like that, and then we'll come back and talk about the legislative session. And Bill, I was asking you before we got on the microphone, I said, I never know what to think. I'm praying that the legislature does the right thing. And so can you tell if it's good or bad what's going on there? It's all some of each, I guess.
Correct. So most people don't understand really how our court system is set up.
I have no idea, actually.
Yeah, so we actually have 20 different circuits throughout the state. Okay. And Brevard County happens to be in the 18th Circuit, which is Brevard and Seminole counties.
Okay.
So it is actually headquartered in Sanford.
Oh.
Okay. As of last year's count, there were 26 circuit judges and 17 county judges. So about 43 judges underneath the 18th Judicial Circuit.
Okay.
Spread between, obviously, Brevard and Seminole counties. As you can guess, Miami-Dade is the biggest with 123 judges. Fort Lauderdale comes in second with 90, and Clearwater's got 69, Orlando's got 69, Tampa's got 68. So there are some much bigger circuits around. As you can imagine, it's based on population, typically. Of the court cases that get filed in circuit, because that's really where I do all my work, that is the part of the court system that deals with probates and guardianships and things like that. They comprise 1/5 of all court filings.
Wow.
For the probate division.
Wow.
So that's a 21.3%, a little over 1/5.
Wow.
Criminal is about 22%. Civil, those are lawsuits, 21.4%. And then the largest is family at 35.1%.
Well, but I wanted to ask you, say that number again about elder law kind of related. Now, if there's if kids are fighting after the fact, does that go into the elder law statistic, or does that go in family?
That goes in, if they're fighting over the money or the parents, that's in the probate division.
So, but you said it was like 23%?
21.3.
21.3, yeah. That's so 1 in 5 cases.
Correct.
Wow.
And just to give you a breakdown on that, in Brevard County, we had in circuit court 18,209 cases. Okay, of those, 5,000, a little over, about 5,100 were criminal cases, about 3,200 were civil cases, 6,000, about 6,100 were family court. That's divorces, child support.
Right.
Probate was about 3,827 cases.
Uh-huh.
And that's where you get the total of 18,209. That's just for Brevard.
And does it tell you how long of a period that is?
That's the year.
Oh, in a year, over 3,000 probate cases in 1 year?
Correct.
Wow.
So, and we have typically I believe there are two judges that are compose the probate. One deals with probate matters and guardianship matters, and I think the other one deals with mental health. Okay? Because then when you get down to the breakdown of what are the probate cases, so we have 2,611 actual probate cases.
Okay,
that's where you're remitting the will to the court and you're running the assets through that, paying the creditors and distributing the assets to the beneficiaries. We have 31 trust litigations. We have 959 commitment acts.
Oh, is that like where somebody...
Baker Acts and Marchman Acts, but the vast majority of those are Baker Acts.
Wow.
That's why there's a judge that handles that part.
The mental side.
Yeah. And then guardianship is 226 cases.
Okay.
In Brevard. So you got basically 3,827 of new cases that were filed last year, or for 23-24, I should say.
Right.
And basically, the majority of those 3,827 cases are heard by two judges. So that's
a lot of work.
And that's not including the existing cases.
Wow.
Because guardianships can go on for years and years and years and years.
Wow. Does it take a long... I guess that's probably partially an answer to a question. It must take a long time for these cases to just simply be heard because of the workload, right?
Well, remember, we have that limited number of judges. We're not one of the bigger counties. Right. You know, if you go down to, I think, Fort Lauderdale, they have 3 or 4 probate judges. In Miami, they even have more. So, you know, when you have one judge handling all that, it can be hard to get hearing time or getting your orders signed. I think the last judge we had, not the current judge, the last judge told us that she was signing 250 orders a day.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So that gives you an idea how much work they're putting in.
Well, you know, as you're going through this, what's ringing in my ears is the fact that we've done so many radio shows where you talk about the value of doing paperwork ahead of time, so you don't have to mess with all this.
Correct.
Right? Isn't that a point?
Well, it gives you an idea of how overloaded the system really is. So if you break that all down by percentages in the probate division, you end up with about 53.6% are actual probates.
Okay.
The next biggest is commitment acts at 40.1%.
Wow.
And I would have, before I saw this, I would have never guessed that.
Yeah.
I would have said maybe 20%, something like that. But by far, that's a lot of Baker Acts. There's a few Marchman Act is like Baker Acts, but it involves alcohol or drugs.
Okay.
And Baker Acts is basically you're a danger to yourself or others.
Right.
Trust litigation's relatively small, 0.4%.
Does that mean? And I'm just kind of thinking out loud. But in a trust, that means somebody's complaining that the trust isn't working right or something like that?
Or trying to remove the trustee because they're not doing their job right, or contesting the trust.
So if the papers were done well, it's probably going to deter a lot of that anyway.
Correct. And that shows in the numbers, correct?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And then guardianships at 5.6, 5.9%,
Wow.
which I would have guessed it would have been a bigger figure.
Yeah.
But, if people do their paperwork, they don't end up in guardianship either. You can get by with a power of attorney and a healthcare surrogate. So, but I was really surprised at the sheer number of Baker Acts that they deal with. And then disposition, that's how many cases they've got through the system. And in the probate division, they've got 3,571 were disposed of. That was 2,379 probates, 25 trust liquidations, 950 commitment acts, and 217 guardianships.
When you're using those numbers, I was just thinking it seems like it was about the same amount in and same amount out, right? Because you said it was maybe give or take 3,000 coming in, and they were able to get through 3,000 of them, more or less.
And correct. And I would say our clerk of courts have really done a good job of getting rid of cases that have just been like on the books, but there was no action. They weren't doing anything. Nobody had done anything for a year in the case, and cleaning it up and getting those cases out of the hopper. So they've gone through and gotten rid of a lot of cases that were just kind of dead in the water kind of things. So that's a lot of work for judges.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, when you think about it, we live in a county with give or take 650,000 people, and we always make the argument on the Helping Seniors side of this that a quarter of those are over 65, and literally about 1 in 2 are AARP definition of a senior, which is 50. And it's really just seems like there's a lot of work to be done in there. But as you were running through all those statistics, it still comes back to me, this is another argument about getting your paperwork done, because the little bit I know about guardianship, it seems necessary sometimes, but it's only necessary a lot of times because people didn't do their right planning, and now there's no other alternative except to do a guardianship. And then it's very intrusive, right? You've got all the costs of court, you've got whatever delays are in there, and it sure seems you would be so much better off if you just, I want to say, take matters correctly into your own hands and do your planning and your paperwork.
And I think that a lot of people have done that to some extent, because there is no real direct correlation between the amount of commitment hearings, cases, versus the amount of guardianships.
Yeah.
You have thousands of commitment cases. Alone in Brevard, they got rid of 950, but there's only 217 guardianships.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't really tell me either. Some people get Baker Acted again and again and again too.
Yeah, yeah.
So that I would assume counts for 3 different entries in the logs.
Yeah, and again, when you're rehearsing these statistics that you did all the research to pull up, we really are talking about within that division. So we're assuming that these are probably seniors that are having the troubles with the Baker Acts and things like that for the most part, right?
Correct, for the most part, or the mentally ill. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's not going to be all just seniors, but I would assume most are probably at least half probably are seniors.
I think that's an important dimension to this whole conversation too, is just the fact that, we talk about this a lot in the Helping Seniors world, that seniors really do mirror the rest of the population. It's just, they just have more age to go with it. But you have poor seniors, you have rich seniors, you have seniors who plan well, you have seniors who've not planned well, you have people who are in good health, you have people who are not so good health, you have people who are needing mental help of some kind, and then not. In fact, I think it was last year, we've been involved, Bill, in a thing called the Brevard Recovery Fest, which is basically it's an addiction recovery nonprofit that does a big fair. I don't know if that's the right word. Probably a fest. Well, they call it Recovery Fest, so maybe that's the best for festival. And they do this out at Wickham Park once a year. And we were invited to come out as Helping Seniors, have a booth there. And so we were out there, and we thought it was amazing. See, there's like over 100 different booths of people who are actively working in everything related to mental health and addiction recovery. And we were talking to them because they say, yes, the seniors are very much represented in that. Because, I mean, obviously you can have younger people who are having issues and trying to resolve it, but apparently it's just as real for seniors as well.
That is true, and I think the numbers have actually gone up
Yeah.
for seniors in that regard.
It's incredible. So this is a little bit what's going on with the courts. We're talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of William A. Johnson. We're actually gonna shift into the second half of the show. We're gonna end up and we're gonna spend some time. We're gonna talk about what's going on legislatively. That's why we called the show a lot of bills, and so I'm looking forward to that. But Bill, are you publishing again you do this great guide that helps people kind of get on the journey?
We are, and that'll be coming out at the Boomerfest.
That's what I thought. What's the title of it?
The Florida Long-Term Care and Nursing Home Answer Book.
And I really got to remind you that I think it's a terrific read, because it's very, like when you start looking at court cases and hearing the different aspects of how technical a lot of this conversation can be. You wrote this in a way that everybody can just access it and start to get some answers to help them on their own aging plan, and it's free. So it's going to be out in the Boomer Guide, which is coming out next month, right?
Correct.
And I think it was available on your website too, right?
It is.
FloridaElderLaw.net. Did I say that right?
You did.
And then you do lots of training. You do a lot of sessions, like at One Senior Place. You'll do education sessions, and you've always got an ongoing list of those too, right?
Correct. We do seminars on estate planning. We do it on Medicaid. Sometimes VA benefits for aid and attendance. Occasionally we talk about special needs trusts and pet trusts and things like that. We try to mix it up a little bit, but usually the bread and butter is doing the estate planning and the Medicaid seminars.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before. You want to get onto the One Senior Place website, because they usually have a list of when you're speaking and things like that.
Correct.
Or they can call your office and ask too, right? And that number would be
321-253-1667.
And again, those are free, right? So you sign up and you just get a chance to learn and then see what your next step should be from there, right?
That is correct, yeah.
Wow. So we're talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of William A. Johnson Law Firm, and we are going to come back and talk about Florida legislative updates in the second half of Helping Seniors Radio. See you in a minute.
12:33 in the afternoon now, here on 90.3 FM. Helping Seniors of Brevard is the name of the show. And Kerry, Fink, it seems like it never fails. Everybody seems to like that song that we have as a theme.
I was smiling as I saw Bill actually dancing along with it, too, because it seems like just last week we had Jennifer Barton and Karen Civitate. Jennifer Barton with Seniors Helping Seniors, and Karen Civitate from AARP, and same thing. You hit that music, it's just timeless.
Yeah, it is, and that dates back to... I guess World War II, right?
Yeah, Glenn Miller. There you go.
Yeah, so
the music of your life, we used to call it.
That's right.
So it's
music of your life now is of your life.
There you go.
And Kerry Fink is the host of our show. Kerry also the executive director of Helping Seniors of Brevard, doing a good job of guiding the good ship through the waters, and we appreciate that. And Kerry, good conversation here with elder law attorney Bill Johnson.
Thank you, John. Yeah, it is good to be here on the radio, 90.3 FM, WEJF. Thank you if you're listening online or if you're catching this as a podcast later. We've been having a good conversation with board-certified elder law attorney, and I'm going to brag on him for a minute because he was also voted in as president, served as president of the elder law section. Am I saying that right? Of the Florida Bar? Is that correct? And served a period of time. He says, I've still got the gavel to prove it. And the point is, we're going to talk about legislative stuff. And I thought it was interesting when we're talking about the court cases, where do the court cases come from? They come from somebody trying to interpret the law or get the law to work for them on whatever side of this that they're on. That's where the judges come in. But if the law is written, then it gives us the guidance of what we're supposed to do and not do. And that's why in Florida we go through this. It's like March through May, or what? What is? It's like a session. Like it's a
Well,
certain.
session just started,
Uh-huh.
and I believe it just started this week. Maybe it was last week, but they vary it by year.
Uh-huh.
So this year we start in March, then next year we'll start in January,
Okay.
and that's so that people can, take vacations for Easter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Every other year.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they vary it by year.
But the point of this is they do all the legislative work inside of like what, a 90-day period, give or take? Is that?
Yeah, but the work actually begins way before that.
Right.
So the first thing, if you want to have a bill, you got to get it into bill drafting,
Uh-huh.
and I think they're up to 15 or 1,600 bills.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, just last week, like 300 came out. So you have to get it into bill drafting, and then when it comes out of bill drafting, then it gets assigned to committees. You have to have a sponsor, and you have to have a sponsor in the Senate.
By
And-
sponsor, that means somebody who is in the legislature who says, I
Correct.
think this is a good idea.
So you have to, and they limit the number of bills for people in the House.
Okay.
They can only sponsor 5 bills, I think. In the Senate, they can sponsor as many as they want.
Okay.
And then once you have the sponsors in the House and the Senate, then the bill works through the Senate and the House it gets assigned to at least 3 committees. And then it goes through those committees and it has to get voted through each of those committees. And if it does that, then it gets to the floor of the House or Senate, and then they vote on it. And the same would have to happen with the companion bill coming through. And then they get together and craft the final bill based on the 2 bills that came through. And then that gets voted on. And if so, then they send it down to the governor for the signature.
Wow. So it's really, I'm smiling at because we're both of the same age where we can remember back to waking up on Saturday morning in Schoolhouse Rock, and they would do the little thing of only a bill on
Right.
Capitol Hill. But it really is it's a big process. And then because the reason I couldn't be here the last time you were in the studio and you guys were doing the radio show together, because I was up in Tallahassee with a group that you've done a lot of work with too, the Florida State Guardianship Association. And it was just, as I was saying during the mid-show break, it was interesting to be kind of like the fly on the wall, because I don't really understand everything these people do, except I appreciate their dedication. But they were talking about a lot of times like a bill will come through, becomes a law, and then they discover there's problems like, well, it's close, but it needs help or something.
Correct. Or there'd be a court case that points out a glaring error.
Yeah.
Or a result happens that nobody likes.
Yeah.
And then they decide to go back and fix the law.
Yeah.
So that happens too.
Wow. So as we're looking into this now, so what we're going to talk about is maybe things that they're trying to see what's going to float this year, right? So do you have like
Correct.
a list, or how do we want to jump into this?
I do. I have
go.
a list. So we have Senate Bill 106, House Bill 97. That is a bill sponsored by the Elder Law section. That is what we call the Stop the Scammers bill.
Oh, good.
And it allows basically if somebody is emailing, let's say your elderly parents who have dementia and trying to get them to invest in, some Nigerian prince scheme, you can actually serve them with a lawsuit via email, the same way they contacted the senior trying to scam them. You don't have to go find a process server and send them to Nigeria and serve the people.
Right.
And what that allows us to do is that then we can go get an injunction and we can stop the money from moving. And so that is why that is important, and that is moving along. It's in Civil Justice and Claims Subcommittee, and I think it'll be moving along quite quickly.
Good.
There was Senate Bill 64, House Bill 223, which is the Granny Cam bill. That's the one that allows for cameras to be placed inside a patient's room at a nursing home. So if you had a loved one in a nursing home and you want to make sure they're getting good care and not being abused or neglected, you would have the right to put a camera in there. There's there's a lot of restrictions on it. You can't be taking videos of the person in the bed next to them,
Right.
because of HIPAA reasons. There was a strike-all amendment done for that, and which usually means they're going to strike what they had and replace it with something. So I don't know where that is moving. I think it was referred to Health Policy, Judiciary, and Rules Committee. So we'll have to see where that goes. The House Bill 353, Senate Bill 566 is patient-directed medical orders. That is a bill that allows a doctor and the patient to agree upon a medical order. The doctor can do that after consultation with the patient, and that even includes end-of-life orders. So if the patient does not want life support continued, you can indicate that to the doctor, and the doctor can enter an order for that. That is kind of tricky because we already have a procedure.
I was going to ask, is that not similar to the do not resuscitate thing?
Correct, or a living will too. And we already have that. So where do we go? Is this just going to add another layer of confusion? Because we already have documents that people can do. So I don't know where that's going to go. Just because it's been up the last few years. They've been trying to do this. They have it in states like California and some western states. So there are a variety of trust bills and on duty of care for trustees, invading the principle of a trust and things like that. I won't bore you with all that.
That sounds like we're getting pretty academic or into the weeds, as they say.
We have another one on curators of estates, Senate Bill 520, House Bill 417. A curator is somebody who takes over while the rest of the family's fighting.
Oh, goodness.
So that the probate continues,
right?
Regardless, and let them all fight about what they're going to fight about.
Okay.
But it allows the state to be administered without waiting for the conclusion of the litigation.
Wow.
There's House Bill 121 and Senate Bill 246. This is grandparent visitation. It's the criteria required for a grandparent of a minor child to petition the court for grandparent visitation. We had a law, it's actually on the books, about grandparent visitation. However, it got struck down by the courts. The reason being that the parents should be the one who decide who gets to visit with their child. And you can't force a grandparent on it. So it does allow a grandparent to petition the court for a court-ordered visitation in certain circumstances. So we'll have to see where that goes.
Is that trying to deal with a situation where the grandparents are having trouble getting along with the parents? Is that where it's trying to get into? Like there's a dispute or something going on there?
It can be, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Let's say the parents died and somebody became the guardian.
Oh,
and it's like on the father's side.
Got it.
But yet the mother's parents want to come visit their grandchild. Can they bar them from seeing the child?
Wow, gets complicated, doesn't it?
Yeah, it can get real complicated. There's a House Bill 407 that is kind of one of these quirky guardianship bills. There's no companion bill yet for it, but it would require guardians to account quarterly, which is one of the big things, and file a monthly statement of the ward's account, and so forth, so on. again, we talked before the show that some of these bills, they just don't think about this, how this would practically, work, because we have a finite number of clerks to review guardianship accountings, and we have a hard enough time getting them to review an annual accounting, let alone them having to review 4 accountings during the year.
Yeah. It seems like a good idea in theory, but nobody's thought about, like, what's the workload going to be on all sides of that?
Yeah, and then the guardians are going to have to prepare 4 accountings and bill for 4 accountings.
Wow.
And the attorneys are going to be involved billing for their time. So we'll have to see where that goes.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think they've been made well aware of the problems with the actual carrying out of this. There's House Bill 277, Senate Bill 910. This deals with veterans benefits assistance. There is a VA program called Aid in Attendance, and federal law says you cannot charge to do an application for this program, okay? But there are a whole variety of businesses out there that do all kinds of crazy things. They'll tell you they'll do the application for free, but then they get to place the person in a facility and get paid by the facility for the placement.
So it's not really free.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's one way they do it. I've seen people do it where they've moved the money and then told them you had to put it in an annuity, and then of course they got paid for the annuity. There are some folks out there, some organizations that are just flat out charging for it.
Wow.
In violation of federal law. Well, this would make a state law now that would be enforceable in the state. You can't do that.
Wow.
So, and it's trying to cut down all these, that whole industry of people that are, preying on the veterans to fill out these applications. You can get a VA in attendance application done for free if you just go to the Veterans Service Office at Brevard County. Also, there are a whole variety of veterans service organizations such as the VFW, American Legion, things like that do the applications for free. So there's no real need to go be paying somebody to do these. Yet, there is an industry out there that does that.
Well, let me ask you a question about that, because you and I have done a lot of shows where we've talked about different things like Medicaid applications and VA applications. And I understand the rule is, they're not supposed to be, you're not paying, you have to do your own application. But boy, we've talked about the pitfalls you can run into if you're not with the look back periods and all those technicalities and asset limits and all those kind of tests. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can dig a hole real quick. And, one thing I know about government paperwork is, boy, if it gets wedged in the system, it takes a long time to get it out.
That is the counter argument.
Yeah.
That is the exact counter argument that, that if it's not put together correctly, it could delay the benefit.
Right.
And there is a whole group of people lobbying the VA to change that rule. But there is a lot of pushback from the VA not to change that rule.
Well, it seems like it's a balancing act, right? Because you're trying to hold out the people who are maybe a little bit unscrupulous. But I mean, it seems like you want, like when you go and do your tax return, you want an expert who understands, like, you can do this, but you can't do that. You need that guidance.
Yes, but there are, again, with anything like that, there are people who are going to take advantage of the situation and start charging veterans $10,000 to do these.
Yeah.
And that's not, we're trying to help veterans, not take their money.
Right.
So that's the counter argument to it. Yeah. There's also a bill to change the Florida Trust Code. It's Senate Bill 806. It wants to make the Attorney General's office exclusive standing to assert the rights of beneficiaries of charitable trusts. So we're not sure how that's going to play out either, because what about the beneficiaries? Don't they have the right to assert a claim against a charitable trust that's gone awry, you know? So, and then there's a big bill, Senate Bill 1086. Right before the show, I went and looked up. There is a companion bill in the House that this bill goes in and dramatically changes the way the area agencies on aging, who are the gatekeepers for the home and community-based Medicaid services, the guardians, so to say, or the gatekeepers to get on the wait list, and how they operate and what contracts they can have. It drastically affects how they do what they do. And this one just came out, I think, last week. Yeah, last week. So it's a pretty lengthy bill. It's 51 pages is the bill. I only printed out the short version is the first 5 pages, telling you what all the things it does, but there's a whole nother 46 pages of actual what it does.
As you were talking about it, you were talking about the number of bills that a Florida House representative could do. I think you said it was 5, but you said Senate folks could do really as many as they saw. But I'm thinking, like, there's a lot of workload, because each one of these things must be almost like a little small book by itself when you read through them, right?
Yeah, and so, you come up with an idea of what you want to do in the bill, but that's why it has to go to bill drafting.
Yeah.
Because in bill drafting, they not only put it in the proper form for the bill, but they also cross-reference everything.
Wow.
So there aren't any unintended, they try to minimize the amount of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
So, like, if this bill goes through, is it going to affect some other area of some other statute and cause a problem?
Wow.
So they have to keep that in mind when they're doing these things, how doing this one thing affects anything else in the state code.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
So that's part of what they do, and that takes time. Typing it up is probably the easiest part, but then they got to make sure you got the right, code sections. And if we eliminate this, does it affect the rest of the statute?
Wow.
Are there references in the statute back to that specific section? And that's the sort of stuff they have to do in bill drafting. That's why it takes a while once you get a bill in to get out of bill drafting. And quite frankly, if your bill's just coming out of bill drafting right now, probably not even going to pass.
Wow.
Because they're already assigning, 1,500 bills to committees.
Wow.
So if you're coming out now, you're the last one, unless, of course, it's a pet, like the governor's pet bill or the chair of the Senate or the House, their pet project.
Something they're wanting to advance. But doesn't this go back to the fact that you were saying at the outset of the show that a lot of these bills take a couple of years because they start working one year and then they have to come back the next year and all those kind of things?
Correct. Sometimes, like that physician's directed orders, this is probably the 4th or 5th year that we've seen that.
Wow.
And usually along the way, they kind of figure out what you need to tweak to get it to pass. Again, that bill could create a lot of confusion, especially if the physician's directed order flies in the face of what they put in a do not resuscitate or a living will.
Yeah. So let me ask this question, because we were talking about, you served as actually the president or whatever they call it, the head of the Florida Elder Law Division at the Bar Association, and you were telling me during the break that you're still involved. You're there on the committee where they're actively having reviews and things and calls and all kinds of things. So how do you, from that perspective, look at all these bills? Is you guys talking about this, or what is the role?
We talk about all of it. So once a week for an hour, I'm on a call where we look principally at administrative things, because there's a whole, besides the statutes, there's a whole administrative code,
right,
which governs the way the different agencies operate under departments. And so we have that group focuses more on that, but we do get an update because there's another group that I am on a call this time of year. It's every week too, on Fridays, which is the legislative committee.
Wow.
So we get somebody files a bill. The lobbyist has this program that if this bill touches one of these sections of the statute, he gets a ding. So then that bill, we get that, and then we figure out what is the subject matter of that bill, and then that gets assigned to a subcommittee. Because in the elder law section, we have a committee that deals with guardianship, Medicaid and facilities, estate planning, and there's a lot of them. There's abuse and exploitation. So whatever that bill deals with, we send it to that committee. And then this time of year, these things move fast.
Yeah.
We usually want them to have a vote on it and get it turned around in like less than 48 hours.
Wow.
Sometimes 24 hours.
Wow.
Because it's moving. And then that gets back to the legislative committee, and then that gets forwarded on to the lobbyists to indicate to the sponsors of the bill whether we can support it, stay neutral, or we oppose it.
Wow. Decisions. We've been talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of the law office of William A. Johnson. And really, Bill, thank you for sharing all this expertise. Like, the more I hear about it, the more I'm impressed with what all it takes just to stay on top of this. We in the Helping Seniors world always talk so much about you got to get an expert behind you on whatever part of aging that you're dealing with. And so, Bill, I want to encourage folks to get that book. I know it's coming out next month in the Boomer Guide, but you can actually get a copy now on your website, floridaelderlaw.net, about learning things that you need to be thinking about for yourself and your family on long-term kind of issues like this. And also, I want to encourage people to take advantage of the seminars that you guys offer, like at One Senior Place. So you can call One Senior Place, get a list of what, just say when's Bill's group speaking, or or I guess they could just call the office. What's the number again there at your office?
Our office number is 321-253-1667.
All right, Bill Johnson, William A. Johnson, PA. Thanks for joining us today, and thank you, listener, for joining us on this week's edition of Helping Seniors Radio. We'll see you right back here next week.